Yo, hopefully there is sound. Let me double check. Sometimes everything goes wacky. Yeah, we're good. Squish. Yeah. All right. So basically, I challenged someone to a debate. They said they might be available tonight. They said they wanted to go ahead and have a discussion. So if they arrive, we will have a debate. If not, we will be watching a little bit of extra stuff. I watched the long version of this. Sansona did a two-parter where he broke this down. This is supposed to be a summary of that. So let's see how it goes.
All right. Well, let me begin again by thanking Pat Flynn for letting me onto his show. And I want to specify here that there is a longer version of this presentation on my channel, but some people complained that it was a bit too long. It's like two parts, and each of them are about 2 hours long. And so I decided, okay, let me shorten the presentation and just get right to the point. And I'm trying to, on the one hand, get right to the point without sacrificing the important nuance that went into the original presentation.
Cool.
And just to give the contents for today, I'm going to look at Gavin's philosophical argument against the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox position. I'll then look at his historical construction or reconstruction of the past, where he's looking at how we got the canon. He's going to argue that it's very much a bottom-up process, organic, grassroots. It's not this top-down magisterial imposition. And then in the end, I'll look at, if I have time, 3 Protestant objections and 3 Protestant inconsistencies when it comes to the canon debate. And then I'll get into my conclusions.
Great.
So the original video that I'm responding to here is Gavin Ortland's video, A Fallible List of Infallible Books. And he's responding to a specific Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox objection. So here's the objection that he's responding to, and I'm just going to quote him. He says, quote, "To even recognize that which is infallible, you must yourself be infallible in some way or have some kind of infallible operation to do so," end quote. I think Gavin is right that this is not a good objection. And the reason why is because, for example, we accept the infallibility of Christ or the inerrancy of Scripture, even though Pat and I know very well ourselves that we are fallible.
Right.
But we think there are sufficiently good reasons to hold to these doctrines. Now, going on then, because I'll eventually get into what my position is.
Okay, so that, just to be clear, that's not Gavin's argument.
Yeah, he's responding to this argument.
Okay,
so a lot of
the
comments that he's making throughout the video are responding to this particular Roman Catholic Eastern Orthodox objection.
I see. Okay, interesting. I've never even heard Catholics make that argument. Usually they're refuting that argument, and it is a very bad argument. I agree. Yeah.
Right. So then Gavin presents this logical argument, and I'll just quote him again. He says, "A necessary witness does not mean a parallel infallibility. The church can fulfill her role of discerning which books are inspired while always remaining at every nanosecond under the word of God with respect to infallibility. Logically, you don't need to be infallible to discern that which is infallible." So the first thing I want to say here is that Gavin recognizes that the church is a necessary witness. He says very helpfully in the next bullet point that, the canon list didn't fall from heaven like a bolt of lightning. And so he affirms then that the church played an important role in the canonization process. We can't just cut out, the first 1,500 years of church history and pretend that we're just going straight from the full canon to where we are now, or Luther was. Rather, the church was that necessary witness. It played a role in that process. But Gavin wants to insist that that doesn't mean on its own that the church has to be infallible. And so he gives a defense. He says, necessity of witness doesn't mean infallibility. You can do that. Now, why is that the case? Because the role is one of discernment. We are not doing anything infallible. We are receiving the infallible. We are not constituting anything. We're not performing any infallible operations ourselves as the church in receiving and discerning Scripture. Now, I think a certain confusion is happening here, and I'll explain in the next slide that he is correct that on the one hand, there is a sense in which we don't constitute the canon. The canon is an independent reality that will be inerrant or correct without us intervening at all. But there's an exception, and I'll get into that exception next. And obviously, what he's going to say is that he disagrees on whether or not the church has to be infallible in order to successfully fulfill its role as that necessary witness. All right, so here's my position. The basic point I want to make is this. If the only way to receive the concrete canon without error, meaning that it matches the Platonic canon, requires that the mechanism be divinely assisted due to the disclosure problem, then that mechanism had better be infallible. All right, so what am I saying here? Let's just break it down really quick. I distinguish between what I call the concrete canon and the Platonic canon. Basically, the Platonic canon is the canon list that exists within the divine intellect. God knows which books he inspired or
basically-
didn't inspire. And so
This is basically forms. He's talking about forms. Why he's calling it Platonic, I'm not really sure. I mean, I get the connection, but I'm saying it's not the best name. I mean, he's just called it the form of the canon. There's a form of the Bible that exists in God's head in heaven that is real. The problem with this argument is that it sounds a lot like the perfect preserved Quran argument that's in heaven that all Qurans are deviated from. So I don't know.
in this way, then, the church does not constitute the Platonic canon. God in himself perfectly knows which books he inspired or didn't inspire. But the concrete canon is the canon list in our possession. So, for example, you have the Ethiopian Orthodox, you have the Protestant canon, you have the Hebrew Bible canon of our Jewish friends, you have the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox
I'm
canon.
going to get some water and I'm going to get some nasal spray. I'll be right back, guys. Don't expect a lot from today's show. We're going to be chilling out and just waiting for an opponent. Here we go.
Canon. These are examples of concrete canons, historical canon lists that have been given throughout time. And so, what I'm saying here is that if you want to know that your concrete canon is correct and without error, then it has to match the Platonic canon. But then this gets us into what I call the disclosure problem. So, the disclosure problem is simply this: because the Platonic canon only exists in the divine intellect, maybe privately so, it is not possible to reason from human means to the Platonic canon. Now, this is very important because what I'm not saying is just because there are things that only God knows with absolute certainty, then that qualifies as a disclosure problem. I heard somebody say that, Swan, well, only God knows what the true church is with certainty. And so I guess then you have to throw out your arguments then for what you think the true church is. No. What I'm saying is that you have two conditions, right? The first condition is that you have something that only God privately knows, let's say with certainty. And the other thing is that you cannot.
It's just way too close, way too similar to the perfect preserved Quran theory. I don't like it. I liked it when I heard it earlier, like when I was listening to his two-part. His nuance was really nice, but now that it's all squished together and he's just being really clear, I don't like it as much. Even if it is a good point, I just don't think this is a good argument. You can't prove something that's in heaven. You know what I mean? Like, this is just. He's arguing for unprovable things. I don't think that's a good move. I mean, just say it's because God said so and let it go. Oh,
Reason from human means to that object of
that's
knowledge.
worthless.
It has to be disclosed or revealed to you. For example, think of C.S. Lewis's argument that one of the reasons why the Trinity must be true is because we wouldn't have come up with it on our own. The point is not that, okay, it just exists in God's mind and only he has certainty about it. It's that you can't even reason from human means to that particular doctrine. You need help from God.
That's a terrible argument. Everything that exists in this world can be made up by man. Everything. Every fictional idea is possible. Don't say this kind of stuff. It makes us look stupid.
And I'm saying here that the canon issue, I think, falls in that exact category. Whereas you can reason from natural theology and a priori arguments to a church with certain features, as, for example, Joshua Sijuwadi has done, or even Rob Koons or Richard Swinburne have done, you can't do the same with the canon. And I could justify that further, but I think I'll just leave it there. To use an analogy, I think the Protestant situation of trying to reason from human means to the Platonic canon is like the Tower of Babel. Remember, the Tower of Babel is that story in the Old Testament where a bunch of people got together and thought they could build a tower that reached up into heaven. I mean, it's a silly idea from the ground up, from the very beginning. And I think that the Protestant situation is similarly futile. To give another analogy, maybe, I talk about a forensic artist. So basically, a forensic artist is somebody who sits down with an eyewitness, and the eyewitness saw the person who did a crime, or at least a person of interest. And what the forensic artist does is they ask questions about, okay, what kind of nose did he have? How did his face look? Was it shaped a certain way? Did he have tattoos? And then that artist recreates the image that is in the person's mind. But that forensic artist doesn't really know that they got it right until they turn the canvas around and the person, the eyewitness, the privileged witness says, yeah, that's what I saw. In the same way, the church is like that forensic artist where we're doing our best to try and figure out what the canon is, but we don't really know if we got it right until we can somehow turn the image around to the privileged witness that is God, who can give us the thumbs up or say, not quite right.
Yeah.
Lastly, with infallibility, I mean, there are basically, I think, 3 ingredients to infallibility. I know that you can probably frame it differently, but basically, it's when an agent is divinely protected from error in some permanently binding action. So the agent is trying to settle something definitively. Basically, it's saying that, this isn't subject to revision. That's why I have the permanence condition there. Because if you say something's infallible, that implies that it's not going to be wrong under any conditions going forward. It's set in stone, basically. But the key thing I want to emphasize here is that if the canon situation is such that we actually need God to disclose the information to us so that it can be without error, then
Let's go with Alex O'Connor, because that was getting
Is there
kind of
God?
boring.
It is the most important question that exists. When I say that I'm violently agnostic, I'm talking about the existence of God.
If there is a God and I'm ignoring that feels like a really bad way to live your life, much less whatever comes after. If there isn't a God and I'm wasting my time by worshiping something that's not there, that's a really bad outcome too. This is a really important question.
The question we're
Who are all
exploring
these
today
old
is
guys
a
that
big
Alex
one.
O'Connor?
Does God exist?
Who are these old guys that Alex O'Connor's debating? I want
And
to
to tackle this question, we've brought in
He is the. What is it? I can't even remember his name. The guy who fought Mike Tyson. He's that guy, but for like old debate bros.
2 intellectual powerhouses. On one side, we have Alex O'Connor, the Oxford philosopher and atheist who rose to fame as a teenager, debating people 3 times his age. Alex recently crossed 1 million subscribers on YouTube. On the other hand, we have Dr. Francis Collins, the former director of the
Who I've never heard of.
Human Genome Project and the best-selling author of The Language of God. Dr. Collins is widely celebrated as one of the most decorated scientists in modern history.
The problem of evil,
It's a hard problem, I will grant you that.
it seems trivially true to me.
Now, I entered medical school.
What do we find? It's
Get
wanting
rid of the
we as
music.
a-
I don't like music. Don't do that shit to me.
exist. For millennia, this question has echoed through ancient temples and
Shut up.
question.
Shut up, shut up, shut up. Go, 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 go.
This
Don't
is what your position is currently. Alex, I thought we would start with you. I've heard you describe yourself as an atheist, but most recently I was watching an interview. You said violently agnostic about God's existence. So what's your current position and how did you arrive there?
In the online atheist community, atheism is sometimes defined as just a lack of belief in God. It's actually something that's pressed quite a lot. People have wasted a lot of ink over this particular question of what it means. And so I think when I was calling myself a hardcore atheist, I would have been the kind of atheist that says, well, I just lack a belief in God, and that's all atheism is. I find that the agnostic label is a bit more accurate when I'm sort of having general conversations with people to explain where I'm at, which is I obviously can't say that God doesn't exist. Interestingly, when somebody says, well, I know you say you're an atheist, but do you know that God doesn't exist? Or are you technically an agnostic? Fine. But a lot of time when I speak to a Christian or a theist, and I say, but do you know that God exists? Like, are you certain?
Yes, absolutely.
about it. They, well, no, I'm not certain, but I believe it.
Oh, I'm absolutely certain.
I wouldn't say, oh, well, technically you're an agnostic then. Because really what you're saying is sort of, what side broadly do you fall on here? And for me, when observing the world around me, I find so many inexplicable mysteries. So I have to die on that fence of agnosticism, as I put it before. But if you ask me to sort of place a bet, I think that I'm at least suspicious of the idea that this is compatible with the traditional creator type figure. And so I'd sort of fall in that camp. But strictly speaking, I have no idea. And sorry to disappoint, but I'm not sure we'll get to the bottom of the question today.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we'll
Counting on that.
we'll do the best that we can.
How would you, I mean, obviously, in the early 2000s, New Atheism, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Tim Harrison, Christopher Hitchens, how would you differentiate the way you think about this question versus maybe the way that they would have thought about this question, if at all?
Well, New Atheism is made up of two components, that God doesn't exist and that religion is evil. There's nothing new about atheism. People haven't believed in God for just about as long as they have. Humanity, I mean. The thing that's different about the New Atheists is that they came along and they did the sociological analysis and sort of like, people don't believe in God anymore. This isn't really part of our culture. But they said, but we don't need it because you can regain your spiritual autonomy and we can ground our ethics in secular humanism and the virtues of, if it's Christopher Hitchens, Thomas Paine and the American Founding Fathers. And that, I think, is where I have to depart company because I think that saying religion is bad is like saying politics is bad. It's kind of, I get why someone would say that, it's kind of true, but it's a little bit naive of a statement. It doesn't mean that there isn't a correct political position. I mean, I could say that politics has caused all kinds of wars and politics has driven people apart, and that's true, but it'd be naive to say, therefore, we can throw off politics and all be anarchists. You can still think that there's a correct political position, or that
Agreed.
having or developing a better relationship with politics and a more thought-out political view would help that problem. But to sort of throw it out altogether, I think is maybe a mistake. The trouble I find myself in is that I can't say, religion is terrible and evil and we're better off without it, but I just don't believe that it's true. And so I can't lie to my children for want of a better society. So I'm in a bit of a tough spot. I'm agnostic as well on that question, in other words. Whereas they would say religion is bad. I would say, I don't know. I think it's probably too simplistic an analysis.
Well, I appreciate your channel and the curiosity that you bring to each episode, and I could really feel that and feel even what you're saying right now. And so I think that's a very interesting way to go about it. Francis, what
I appreciate you, Griff. It's very nice and helps my channel too.
about you? What's your current position and how'd you arrive there?
I appreciate what Alex is saying, that sometimes we try to put these categories of belief.
I know this is not what's happening, but it reminds me of when two gurus for like sales or for like motivational speaking get together. They're like, you're a great guy. Oh, you're a great guy. No, you're awesome. No, you're awesome.
Belief or non-belief into very specific subsets. Maybe we trichotomize it.
Like, we don't say the same thing, we do the same thing, but I think we really help each other. And I'm really proud that he has his audience and I have mine. Yeah.
You're an atheist or you're agnostic or you're a believer. I think it's really much more of a spectrum. And I think I've traveled across that spectrum during my whole life and not found it like I was jumping from one box to the other. It was sort of sliding along and then going, well, maybe not in this way. So let me tell you how it started. I was born in a family about 3 hours from here in Virginia. My dad was a college professor. My mother was a playwright. We lived on a farm that had no indoor plumbing. There was no interest in faith in my childhood upbringing. It wasn't denigrated. It just wasn't considered to be relevant or important. It was all about music and theater and the arts and literature and a bit of history. I did not go to public school until the 6th grade, and not for religious reasons. It's because my parents thought they were better teachers than what was available in the public schools in that county. And they were right. So I learned a lot from my mom and dad, particularly about the joy of learning new things, which I carry with me my whole life. But I didn't learn a thing about what religion was all about or whether God exists. So in that spectrum where atheism's over here and really strong, no doubt in your mind belief is over here, I was undefined. And then I landed in college, and you know how it is, those 2:00 in the morning discussions where, what do you believe? What do you believe? I thought the atheist had the better hand in those conversations and decided, okay, I'll throw myself in with that lot. So I was an atheist, left college, went to graduate school, studied quantum mechanics, loved the mathematics, loved the beauty of science, that equations could describe things. It didn't occur to me that might not have been the obvious outcome for the universe, but I was completely focused on what you could call scientism, that any question that was worth asking was a scientific question, and any question that couldn't be answered that way was off the table. And then I had this change in my life plan about exactly where I wanted my professional career to go. I was a little bit disillusioned with the abstractness of what I was doing in quantum mechanics, even though it was kind of fun, and felt this urge to do something more directly connected to people. And so I went to medical school, which was quite a 180-degree turn scientifically from where I had been, thinking that the life science was just much too messy. By the way, it is, but it mattered. Now, I entered medical school as an atheist over here on this end of the spectrum, and I left kicking and screaming, having crossed over all of those intermediates and landed somewhere over here as a Christian, but a Christian who had lots of questions and lots of doubts, but who had made the decision that this is true enough for me to throw myself into it and to have this be my foundation until there's some reason not to. And that was 47 years ago, and I'm still a Christian. And I have, waffled around a little bit over there on that end of the spectrum, depending on what kind of challenges come along.
Alex O'Connor is beating up more grandfathers.
Deep into what the real foundation of that faith is, and particularly the person of Jesus. That's now such an anchor to the way I think about everything that I can't really imagine walking away from it. Can I prove it? No.
Ask a better question. I'll answer it, but word it somewhat differently. Or come into the room. Here, hold on. Let me read. My link's up there, but I'll give you another one. Blessed be. Ask the question more formally. Give me something to respond to, or you can come into the room. Either one. You can text it longer. You can do a longer text, and I'll answer it, or you can hop in. Either way is fine. Tell me why it doesn't make sense. Give me something to object to.
Do I believe it? Yes.
Well, I think as we embark on this conversation, it's important to define terms. You said, "Can I prove it?" And
Thank you for asking the
you
question.
spoke
I
about truth a
appreciate
lot in your latest book, and so you seem to make a distinction. I think this is important when we talk about God's existence because we throw around the term evidence. So you make a distinction between proof and evidence. So how would you differentiate those terms?
I think that's really important. The book I wrote 18 years ago about my own faith journey called The Language of God, the subtitle is A Scientist Presents Evidence for Belief. Not?
So, well, Blessed Be is asking a better question. I'll answer the way that he worded originally, but I don't want to straw man him, so I'm just going to ask the question that he's asking. Oh, here you go. Well, that's not very nice, now is it? So let's answer the first question. He goes, why are you still a Catholic? It makes no sense. So I'm a Catholic because I have Catholic beliefs and I do Catholic practices. I literally believe the things that Catholics believe, and I practice the things that Catholics practice. I go to church. I do the Liturgy of the Hours. I believe in the Pope. So then he says, and I got to word it differently than you question it, but he goes, well, he makes an accusation that I'm not going to read. So I'm going to change to a question. Do you support bad priests who are criminals, put it that way? No. And actually the amount of abuse in the church has actually lowered to less than that in secular communities now. It's less than in public schools, which I guess is good. Why did? Well, they didn't. That was actually the catastrophate that had to do with music, nothing to do with the priesthood. But it was a practice done to keep people's voices high pitched. That was actually a practice across the board, not just in religious things. It had to do with music, singing, acting. Yeah.
So I don't think God intended for us to have proof. If there was, we would all be running around being good little believers, following what is incontrovertible evidence that we absolutely have to accept this. I think God had in mind something much more interesting and something that called more to us to make a decision, not to have it forced upon you by some mathematical proof. And maybe, what is it, Eugene Peterson said, if God wanted us to have a mathematical proof, it would have been tough to say, I love you in algebra. There's a lot more here than what you would call that sort of a proof. So I do think it was evidence, and I can tick off a few of the things that appealed to me as I was kicking and screaming, giving up my atheism and ultimately my agnosticism because I didn't want to. To recognize that there was a lot here that was hard to dismiss. Some of it, of course, is the nature of the universe and how it's put together, and we may end up talking about that.
Yeah, we will.
The fact that the universe did have a beginning, and that seems to cry out for a cause. Here we are in Kalam, and that it has this remarkable fine-tuning of all these constants that even the astronomer Martin Rees, who's not a believer, that wonderful book he wrote about 6 numbers, seem to have had the dial set in an exquisitely careful way in order for there to be anything interesting here, and not just a bunch of particles. So, of course, the retreat from that is the multiverse option, which is an option, but it seems to me require at least as much faith as the one that says, actually, there's an intelligence behind this that explains, Maxwell's equations, that are the way in which electricity and magnetism operate.
I already answered that question, Blessed. I told you. It wasn't just them. It was the common practice of most opera and acting and singing to do that to people. The particular monks who were doing that were just practicing the same misinformation and I would say bad science, but I really wouldn't call it science. It's the same reason why in China they made girls' feet, why they disabled and disfigured girls' feet. The same reason why in other countries they do stuff. Actually, it was a practice in other musical things. It wasn't just the Catholic Church who did it. It's a thing that was done throughout the world. You should actually look up some of the Chinese tortures, especially the stuff around Empress Wu. It's really interesting. It's a little distasteful for me, but I used to be able to read that kind of stuff and not wince. But after reading a particular brutal torture to one particular princess by Empress Wu, my taste for that kind of literature has gone away. But
simple, beautiful equations. I mean, as somebody who used to be in that field, first encountering Maxwell's equations, it's like, wow, this is like watching an incredible work of art being generated. Why should that be? It does seem to cry out for an intelligence. And of course, Einstein would have agreed with that part. Now we're just talking about deism, not theism.
Again, it wasn't the Catholic Church. And again, atrocities happen across the board. It's just a human action, dude. Whataboutism is not a good look for anybody. I don't recommend it. If that's the route you're going to take, I'm probably not going to keep answering your questions. So don't go with whataboutism. But yeah, no, in general, people do terrible things. Yeah. But if you're going to ask these many questions and they're going to be this distracting and not really good questions, just hop on in. It'll be more entertaining for the audience for them to hear your voice.
The theist part, for me, a lot of it comes down to the
only thing that I ask is that you be over 18 and that you be respectful. But if you want to come in, just come in. There's already a link.
moral law, the idea that there's good and evil, and the ability to try to explain that purely on the basis of evolutionary psychology falls short of me. It doesn't explain the kind of radical.
If you don't think horrible, terrible things are part of human nature, you're not paying attention to the world. Look at what Islamists have done to Americans in wartime. Look at what Americans did in Vietnam. Look at what the Vietnamese did. If you don't have an understanding of human violence, you're too naive to understand what religion is talking about. No, my religion's fine.
altruism that we as humans tend to admire when we see it, and which is sometimes a scandal to evolution. Why should that be? So the moral law, and then the whole phenomenon of beauty. I don't find it easy to dismiss experiences that sort of lift me out of myself, which for me is often music. This exquisite longing, poignant longing that's inspired in your whole being by a particular beautiful piece of music. It feels like it's some kind of an outreach to your very soul. And I don't know how to explain that on the basis of neuroscience, although I imagine neuroscience will find there is some properties of the brain that supports it.
Again, blessed be, you're just doing whataboutism, because then all I'm going to respond back is all the times that secularists did all the exact same things, or that atheist countries did the same thing, such as the Soviet Union or communist China or whatever you want, Cuba. You can go and do all the same stuff, but people are naturally prone to do horrible things. Animals are naturally prone to do horrible things. It's not just people. It's not a people problem. It's a living animal problem. Go watch an animal kill another animal. Go watch an animal not kill another animal and torture another animal. It's brutal. I'm not just talking about religion. This is a human problem. It's not a religion problem. It's actually an animal problem. It's not even a human problem.
So again, not a proof, but for me at 27, having walked down this trail bit by bit, realizing that my arguments of strict atheism really couldn't be sustained, I got to that place where I had to decide whether to take the leap. There was no going back. That had already crumbled behind me. The only real alternative.
Human beings are animals. Have you not gotten the message? Do you not believe in evolution or science?
Was to stay in this awkward, uncertain space, or to say, okay, I find it no longer possible to stay there and to resist.
Yeah, that's
I'm gonna
good.
trust you, God, to meet me on the other side of that gap.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke a lot of different areas: philosophical argument, science. I'm curious how you go about this process. You had a couple videos on your YouTube channel, arguments for atheism and arguments for theism as well. And so, I'm just curious to unpack your mind on like how you think about this in terms of evidence and reason and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, when I say that I'm violently agnostic, I'm talking about the existence of God. I don't know what God is. I don't know what this word is supposed to refer to, right? And I remember like, for some reason this stuck out to me. I was speaking to somebody once who's not really into philosophy or science or anything. And we were just talking and he sort of said, yeah, well, I don't believe in God, and carried on talking. And something about the way he said it, I just thought to myself, what is the thing that you have in your head when you say that? Like, what is the referent for the word God there? What is the thing that you don't believe in? The cliche is for the Christian to find out and say, well, guess what? I don't believe in that God either. Whatever it is you have in mind. But it's true because God.
Baptists have committed just as many atrocities as any other religion. Do you want to talk about the Anabaptists? Or about anyone who is opposed Baptists? Or do you want to talk about in America what happened between the antebellum South and the Yankee North? You want to talk about the Civil War and what the roles Baptists played in that situation? No one's clean. No one's hands are clean. No one can go back 30 or 40 generations and say, my ancestors never did anything wrong. If you're an American, you have American issues with you. If you want to say you're from some different country, I guarantee you whatever country you were in has been in a war where they've done terrible things to other people. Even if it's suppression of their own people. This is not a religion problem. And it's not a Catholic or Baptist problem. Your worldview is too narrow.
What is, if we listen to the way that God is described in Scripture, but also in the traditional philosophical schools of thought, it's not the man in the sky, but it's also not.
For those watching and wondering who am I talking to, I am on StreamYard right now waiting for an opponent who said he wanted to debate me on does God exist. I'm waiting for him to come in. I do not know if he's going to show up, but he said he might. or he said he would actually, but I'm going to say he might to give him an out because he doesn't show. And what I'm doing is on one of the links that I have, I'm getting comments underneath it and I'm responding to those comments. So if you're watching from one of the other streams and you don't know who I'm responding to, that's why.
Not like a creative mind. I mean, Aquinas would say that God is not even powerful. God is not like loving. God is not knowing. God is not any of those things, because those are all just analogous terms.
On Streamlab, I do have a widget that shows all the conversation. I just don't have that on StreamYard because I'm using the free version.
That somewhat approximate the kind of thing that God might be like, right? And so if there is a God, I think it's sort of far beyond comprehension.
But StreamYard's just way better for guests because people can just click the link and hop in. I'm also probably going to be using X for that in the coming year, so we can do easier debates with people who can just chime in and speak their mind.
And so my agnosticism is partly due to that. I think that without the guidance of some form of scripture, the reason we know that we can use these analogies accurately, even if we can't understand the thing they point to, is because we have it on the authority of someone like Jesus. The problem is that my agnosticism doesn't extend to religious traditions like Christianity. Those I unfortunately do think are false. At the very least, I don't think there's good enough evidence to believe in the truth claims of Christianity, the crucial parts of the resurrection, for example. That's a sticking point for a lot of people. That brings a lot of people to faith. It doesn't do it for me. Also, the moral qualms, the same moral intuition that I'm told I'm supposed to rely upon to prove the existence of God, is that same moral intuition that I'm supposed to ignore when I encounter the less than enviable situations of.
Blessed be, why would I block you? If you start saying offensive shit, I will. Or if you start mocking any of my viewers, I will. But you haven't said anything offensive yet. I don't know why you're being paranoid. But don't be stupid. You start saying stuff that will get me demonetized, I'll definitely block you. And if you start attacking any of my friends, I'll block you immediately.
Of the Canaanites,
Yeah, Old
or
Testament.
Hebrew slaves, or non-Hebrew slaves, to make things worse. But also in the New Testament, the treatment of women is something that raises a lot of eyebrows.
And you haven't challenged me yet, Blessed. You've only distracted me from watching this thing that I'm enjoying. Again, there's a link. Hop in.
Interestingly, I think the atheist has an escape route there, because I think that Paul didn't write a lot of what we find attributed to Paul in the New Testament. But that's not really an option for the
I think I remember you back when you were in Gar streams and you would be a little bit distracting. I don't know if you ever came on live, but I remember you from Gar streams.
New Testament trusting Christian. So I'm sort of the one who can absolve Paul here. I don't think he wrote those words in 1 Corinthians where he says that women should, if they have a question, they should go home and ask their husbands. It's a disgrace to speak in church. I don't think he wrote those words, and I think we have good evidence to think he didn't. I don't think he wrote the entire book of 1 Timothy. And so a lot of those problems sort of go away for me. But if I'm looking at the Christian religion, that moral intuition that so powerfully tells people, well, you know certain things are right or wrong. You know it. Even if you want to sort of try to psychologize it or talk about evolution or anything, you know somewhere that there's a moral feeling that certain things are right or wrong. And even if I say, okay, sure, yeah, great. So what does that mean I should do? Well, that should lead you to Christianity. And then the first thing I see opening that book is something which contradicts the very moral intuition that I was supposed to use to get there in the first place.
No, I do not agree with that, blessed be.
That leaves me with some cause for concern. When it comes to the actual existence of God, the fine-tuning and
And considering I've read multiple histories of the church, most of them academic, one popular, and one historical, Eusebius, I'm probably more familiar with that history than you are. Unless you happen to have a degree in, I don't know, the Crusades or something like that. But assuming you don't, I'm probably a little bit more familiar with the atrocities surrounding Christianity than you are. Although I don't have a very strong grasp of the atrocities that happened in the 100 Years' War, just because I haven't really been interested in that. I kind of the history of Europe taking place in Europe doesn't really interest me, even though I've tried to get into it. Like I try to get the history of the kings. I want to read the history of the kings of Britain, but I can't get myself to buy it. And I got so many other books to read that it just kind of doesn't feel like there's a point to it. Again, you're talking about human problems, and also the Catholic Church hasn't committed atrocities unless you can name some. I can name a lot of people who are Catholics who did bad things. I can name you a lot of bad things that happen in the name of the church, in the name of Christianity, in the name of Jesus. But unless you're going to start blaming Jesus, like the atheists and anti-theists do, for the things that evil people do in their name, you really shouldn't be blaming the Catholic Church for things that people who were excommunicated for their crimes, or people who were punished and censored for their crimes, did in the name of the church, if the church itself punished those people and disavowed them and disavowed their actions. But like I said, if you want to hold the same standard, you have to hold Christ to the same standard. I hope you're ready to become a heretic today or an atheist.
First calls type stuff.
I
I'm kind of
personally
okay with
wouldn't go that way.
this. Like, I mean, what are we thinking about God?
Again, if you start insulting, that does get you blocked. So don't do that. Speak like a human. Speak like a person. I'm assuming you're a guy. I don't know that you're a dude. You might be a girl. I don't know. But if you're a man, be respectful and speak your mind and attack outright. Ask a real question. Don't go off the hinges. This is not that kind of channel. Have evidence, have an argument. I'll gladly reply.
God as being? If we think of God as someone who's sort of like finely tuning constants, the strong and weak nuclear
And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know.
forces and the gravitational constant, sort of like almost like typing them all into a computer or something, then we're starting to imagine God as more of this sort of intervening agency, which is what I was trying to avoid before.
No, that's fine. But then you're not a Baptist. So that makes me doubt everything you're saying. Sounds like maybe you might be an anti-theist who's angry with God. But I'm assuming you're just an anti-Catholic with anti-Catholic bias.
Before. I do have specific responses to each of these arguments, by the way. So like the fine tuning,
Yeah, we'll
or
get
the first call stuff, whatever, which we can do.
Yeah.
But just as a broad overview, I find it impossible to really say what would count as evidence or proof of God's existence, because I don't even know what this God figure is.
Yeah.
But I do know that the religious traditions that have sprung up in response to apprehension of the divine have given me cause for concern.
Yeah, I mean, well, Francis was talking about
No, I'm just watching you troll very poorly.
the faith being a spectrum. I think also looking at this question and zooming out.
But there's only 4 people in the room, so you're wasting your time. I'm literally just waiting for someone to come in here so we can debate. So, and it looks like the audience is not enjoying this, because every time we get up to 5 people and you keep doing that, people are hopping out. So I might stop responding just so I can get people to get into the room.
And I do want to zoom out, because if you subscribe to a particular belief system like Christianity, there are things from the Bible that we learn about God, right? But I think a lot of people are in this place of, like you're talking about, agnosticism, where, you know, even if fine tuning were true, like, does that necessarily indicate that that is the Christian version of the God? And so we have, you know, atheism, agnosticism, then we have maybe deism or theism, which is like a more detached picture with deism of maybe a creator, but isn't necessarily this loving depiction of God seen through Jesus. And so I kind of want to work through each of those individual points. And so you both mentioned the fine tuning of the universe. And so that discovery comes from science. And so in your last interview with Richard Dawkins, he said this was the nearest approach.
I don't understand how fine tuning has become a scientific argument. I remember back in the day, fine tuning and the divine watchmaker were religious arguments. And I've seen in the last 6 months, maybe, that when they're doing the false dichotomy thing that really annoys me, they're putting fine tuning on the science side. When did that happen? When did that turn happen? Is that because of physics, theoretical physics, that turn happened? Or did I miss something in the apologetical world?
To a good argument. And so considering most people are listening to this are novices to science, can you unpack what fine tuning is?
Sure. And it's a fairly recent realization, actually. You know, we do have this remarkable set of equations that govern the behavior of matter and energy. The gravity it follows an inverse square law, that the speed of light is fixed, that all of the properties of the atom follow certain abilities and rules about how they stick together or fly apart. Those laws, beautiful as they are, have constants in them that I don't know really anybody who will say we can derive the value of those constants from first principles. They're related to
Blessed, I'm going to ask you to please stop using that word because I will have to block you to keep my monetization. I don't want to have to block you for that. Just use one of the YouTube friendly words, man. I mean, say fettuccine. I don't give a crap, but just understand monetization is more important to me than just keep it YouTube friendly, dude.
each other. So maybe there's some connection between them, but you can't figure out what they have to be on the basis of theory. You have to go and measure them. And so they have a particular.
Also, just know that if you are on YouTube making these comments, YouTube will start auto yeeting your. I know yeeting is an old word now. I don't know what the current term is. Just they'll start auto deleting your comments. So just be careful with that because once the algorithm picks it up and they start auto deleting stuff, there's nothing I can do to see your comments. So just be careful, man. I know you're trying to be edgy, but I'm telling you, be careful because once the algorithm picks up that you're doing that I won't see anything that you're saying. They let you see the comment, just to let you know. They let you see the comment. So you think I'm seeing it, but YouTube won't let the comment post, so I won't see it. There's a buddy of mine that I like who says edgy stuff on my channel all the time. And only because I have the widget do I get to see his comments. They don't actually show up on my channel because YouTube auto deletes them. Just letting you know, man. So just even if I don't do it, YouTube itself will do it. So try to be smart about it. I don't even know why I'm trying to help you out, but I'm trying to help you out. Just try to be smart about it.
Particular value. And maybe the easiest one to explain is gravity, because that's certainly familiar to us in every day. So yeah, there's that inverse square law, and there's the gravitational constant. And that is, of course, important in the beginning of the universe for the way in which, after an inflationary period of everything flying apart, they began to actually coalesce. And that's how we got clouds of gas, which then became ultimately stars and planets and moons, and ultimately us here talking about it. So gravity is pretty important. But if you tweak the value of that gravitational constant just a little bit, depending on who you ask and whose calculation you did, I mean a very little bit, maybe 1 part in a million.
What is the 1 part in a million?
One.
Like, how can you contextualize that?
Okay, if you imagine the gravitational constant out to 7 decimal places, and you change that last decimal place that was an 8 into a 7, and the rest is all the same. And then you go through the math about what would happen if it was just a little bit weaker. There isn't quite enough there to get the coalescence to happen. And so you end up with things just flying apart in a pretty boring, sterile way.
Okay, so because apparently, Blessed, you don't seem to know things, I'm going to show you my chat from a different view. I haven't deleted anything. I want to tell you this. So I'm using a different platform because I'm streaming for someone else right now. Stop. I'm streaming for someone else. I'm going to show you your comments. All the stuff that you said that was really, so you'll notice that some of the more inflammatory stuff that you said isn't actually in the actual live chat. I can only see it because I'm using a different platform that's copying everything that you're tweeting at me or putting at me. But if you notice, some of your comments aren't there. That's not me deleting them. I don't have a program. I don't have any blocked words or anything like that. YouTube won't show them to the actual public, so nobody can see what you're saying. I'm being real with you, man. The more inflammatory and the more gross you're acting, YouTube will just automatically delete those comments. They never actually get on air. So you think you're talking to me, but if I wasn't on a different platform that shows me what you're typing, I wouldn't be able to even respond to you. Like, I don't know how you don't know this, but for real, man, I'm not seeing all your comments. If I was just using YouTube or just using my normal app, I wouldn't see you. I wouldn't see what you're saying because you're being inflammatory and you're saying things that aren't. You're not blocked by me. You're being. YouTube has an auto detection thing. It automatically blocks certain words and blocks certain stuff that it considers bad. So there's nothing I can do, dude. Sorry.
If you make it just a little stronger, then things come together a little sooner. But also, the expansion of the universe has a limit. And knowing that it takes billions of years before you get to the point where something like complexity of chemistry can happen because of all the things that have to happen in stars, you'd never get to that point. Everything would collapse back in a big crunch. So in order to have this possibility of something beautiful and interesting, that had to have exactly that done. And the strong and the weak nuclear force and multiple other constants all have to have that same property.
So you're talking about like the conditions needed for life to exist on Earth.
Or for anything interesting. And it's not just about this kind of life or this kind of Earth, just anything beyond some particles, which hard to me imagine much intelligence coming out of particles flying apart by themselves. So anything that you would call thought seems to require these particular parameters to be set in a very precise way. And that seems to cry out for an explanation. And again, as somebody who also finds beauty in the equations, I find awe in the values of those constants, and they do call out to me for an intelligence that is far beyond anything I could possibly imagine, who I don't think had to sit there and punch it, like it just knew and thought, and here it was. And I get it, that the alternative is that there are an infinite number.
I do run a normal channel. YouTube does this all the time. So if you've been saying inflammatory things in other people's channels, there's a good chance they don't see it. It's just you talking to yourself. This has been the policy on YouTube for a while now. I hate to bust your bubble.
Number of other parallel universes. And of course, we have to be in the one where something interesting could happen to have this conversation. But the inability to ever measure, except in the weirdest sort of way, the possibility that those really exist, seems then to require a great leap of faith to believe in the multiverse. Maybe for me, greater than believing in a creator who made it this way for our universe. So yeah, I think it seems a little too easy to dismiss that and go, well, it's the multiverse. Think about that. The other thing is, that doesn't solve the question of why there's something instead of nothing.
Yeah.
Sort of the big ultimate question. And that also seems to require some kind of an uncaused cause to have there be some.
Yeah. So, I mean, in essence, it was fine tuning. I think I saw this online somewhere, but someone was saying like if you took a pencil or something and you like threw it across the universe at a bullseye on like Pluto or something, that like and hitting it would be like that.
All right, my usuals, my friends. I saw everyone hop in real quick and then hop out. If any of you, my usuals, still here, yeah, I see you guys. Hi. I'm gonna only go about maybe 6 more minutes, 7 more minutes. Once it hits the 1 hour mark, if my opponent, I don't want to name him because he didn't show, and I don't want to sound like I'm calling him out. But if he doesn't show up, I'm gonna go ahead and nuke this this live stream. So, but yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about what Alex is saying because I like the fact that they're kind of wincing on the fine tuning argument. But once that's done, I don't think the other guy's going to show up. So at least we got to hang out with each other for an hour, and I'm happy about that. I'm really glad y'all were here. Even blessed be for all their inflammatoriness. And guys, I really am sorry that you couldn't see like half of his or half of her. I don't know who it is. Whoever the person is, half of their comments. I'm sorry you couldn't see them. They were saying stupid things, and you know, algorithm's algorithm. It's going to algorithm.
That would be the chances that life would exist or something. And so the argument essentially is that with fine tuning, life is just so incredibly unlikely that like, what is the explanation for that? And I've heard you talk about this a little bit in your podcast and interviews. And I think you said that you find this going to be compelling, but it doesn't really move you really. But so can you explain what you're
Yeah, I mean, of course it's compelling. It's a great mystery, and it's an amazing finding, right? That if we were to adapt these values, then nothing could exist. There are so many questions that spring
I promise I wasn't just responding to myself. They were actually saying things.
up in my mind. There are just so many, it's difficult to know where to begin. I mean, we said for a moment ago, you know, God doesn't punch in those numbers. He just kind of knows that that's how it has to be.
He doesn't have to punch anything.
Is God constrained by these constants?
He chooses to be.
He chooses to
I
be.
don't know that in his existence those constants exist. He's not part. He created, but he is not himself part of the created universe.
So this is the thing that sort of confounds me, is that before the universe exists, and you just have
That
to
is so perfect. That is such the right statement. Let me hear that again, because that was perfect. That was a perfect response. That's what I would say.
in those numbers, he just kind of knows that that's how it has to be.
He doesn't have to punch anything.
Is God constrained by these constants?
He chooses to be.
He chooses to
I
be.
don't know that in his existence those constants exist. He's not part. He created, but he is not himself part of the created universe.
So this is
Yeah,
the thing
he
that
created all the rules that we have in this universe. So in this universe, all those rules apply, and he's not going to break his own rules. But outside of this reality, we don't know anything about outside of this reality. So, you know, all the rules and constraints that has emerged, especially since the Reformation, on who or what God can or can't be, is just meaningless because we don't know. That's kind of the whole point.
sort of confounds me is that before the universe exists and you just have sort of God up in the ether,
I literally can't say the words you were saying without me getting demonetized, and I am a monetized channel. Blessed.
he's sort of thinking about creating this universe, to put it crudely. And for some reason, God is confined to these very narrow restraints, and in fact could not create a life-emitting universe, but within those constraints. And those and therefore, before this universe is even created, God is in some way constrained by the strong and weak nuclear
I
forces.
don't understand.
Also, whenever someone says those kind of words, or they even in the chat, I think is enough to do it. Your channel can also get deranked, and it can get it'll stop being promoted by the algorithm, and it can even be throttled. So, like, seriously, I'm trying to grow my channel, so I'm trying not to say the words that are not allowed on YouTube anymore, including my favorite word, which is the F word. I just can't say it, and it's my favorite word. I'm having to get out of the habit of saying it all the time, just so I can keep monetization and keep my videos getting promoted. So if you notice the videos that do really well, they get over 1,000 views. Yes, you can say that. You can say PDF, and that will get you. That won't. I think that'll show up. Hold on, let me look. I can tell you right now if it showed up or not. Yes, you can say PDF without getting auto yeeted. There you go.
Understand that at all. You're suggesting that
That's why Internet Speak and YouTube Speak exist. It's like the old Elite Speak back in the day. If anybody remembers Elite Speak, Elite Speak, that was so annoying. And I learned it so I could talk to like one specific type of woman that I liked, and it was pointless because yeah, that didn't go anywhere.
God is part of the creation that God put in place for the universe. God doesn't have to be constrained that way. God is outside of space, outside of time,
Yeah.
not basically having to adhere to any of such.
I don't mean that God is constrained by those forces, that they're like acting upon him. I mean that he's constrained in the sense that he can only create a material world that abides by those particular constraints.
Oh, I think you could create any material world. I think he wanted to create one that was interesting. And so he made the selection of those equations.
Well, I don't. I think that they should go to jail. That's what I think. So yeah.
And those constants in order for it
And
not to
like I answered earlier, since they made a whole bunch of rules. Lizzie Answers has a really good video on this, actually. They did a whole bunch of rule changes, and since they did those rule changes, the actual amount of abuse has gone down to now be less than what's in public schools. So, not that it's good that it's in public schools, but it's good that the instances within the Catholic Church have gone down to a much lower than average occurrence. So that's good. Be great if it was zero, but you know that's like saying it'd be great there was no murders in the world.
just be a big waste of time.
But would it have been impossible for him to create a universe that's life-emitting and just as interesting,
Not
in which gravity was stronger?
Well, I don't think it would have been as interesting. I
But-
think
but-
God was interested in thought.
But I mean a thought-permitting universe, right? So like a universe where basically everything is the same as it is now. Let's say that the gravity is stronger, but this dark energy that's causing the universe to expand is a bit stronger. Or there's some
I don't
other
know if you guys have watched the stuff on dark energy the last 2-3 weeks, but they're saying it might have been disproven. So dark energy might no longer be a thing. Do I donate to the Catholic Church? You better believe I donate to the Catholic Church. I tithe, like the Bible tells me to do.
introduced force, or in other words,
Tithe?
when God
Tithe.
goes to create the universe,
Tithe.
is he constrained in the sense that if he wants to create this thought-permitting universe, that everything has to be so finely balanced? In other words, I'm not sure why the meta conditions are set up so that everything is on such a knife edge. Maybe I can spell it out like this, right? So imagine, I have a friend who, Phil Halper, who made this documentary about the fine-tuning argument. And there was a really interesting response that made reference to the Gnostic Christian tradition. The Christian Gnostics believed in the sort of the material world being the product of an evil demiurge. It's like this God of the Old Testament is the evil creator of the material world, and Jesus represents the true God, who is spiritually pure and above all. And he was like, well, doesn't the fine-tuning argument kind of fit in better with this kind of picture of the universe? Why? Because the spiritual creator who realizes that the material world is evil and terrible doesn't want the material world to come about, and so he makes it so that it is near on impossible for a material universe like this to exist. And yet the evil demiurge wants to create that universe. And so he comes in and he perfectly tunes everything. So although it's completely improbable, he just makes it right that the material world can be created. What I think that this kind of slightly contrived image can help to demonstrate is that the very fact that it is.
I'm going to let the dude whose name I don't know respond. I'm going to let Dr. Francis or Dr. Collins, whatever you want to call him, respond to Alex. And then I'm going to call it a night because the other guy didn't show.
Is so difficult to bring about the material world, but by finely tuning these constraints is itself a sort of a backfiring.
No, the Catholic Church is lower than the norm when it comes to abuse now. So the Catholic Church is actually doing better than the rest of the world on this issue. Currently, it might not stay that way, but at least right now, they're doing better than the rest of the world, where before they were doing worse. So as someone who's a member of the church, I think that's a good improvement.
Against the existence of a creator God who wants there to be a universe like this and has the power to do it in any way which he pleases. For example, another analogy from the same documentary, if you were to have like a
But again, you're confusing individual members with the actual belief system. The belief system is what I believe in, not the individual people. Individual people can be evil and horrible, just like in any group or society. And even groups of people can be evil and horrible. That's not the point. The point is, does the belief system work? And does the belief system hold true if you practice it? Which it does. That's how things work.
a bag of balls, and you were pulling out a ball, and you were trying to figure out what the favorite color of the creator of the bag was, and you reach in and you pull out a purple ball. That might be confirming evidence that the creator of the game likes the color purple. But if you then tipped out every other ball and looked at every single other one except for the one that you picked was yellow, you might actually think to yourself, oh, okay, the creator of this.
I think he just thinks I'm another atheist, BS. Not just because I'm Catholic, but because I hang out with you all. I got the stench of atheism around me. Maybe it's on my shoe or something. I don't know. How you doing, BS? I was just about to close out, but I'm glad you're here. You want to hop in for like 10 minutes? You're welcome to. I was waiting for a debate with a guy who's been challenging me on an atheist who's been challenging me on the Alex O'Connor debate that I did, talking about how, well, just because their arguments weren't good doesn't matter, because just because his now you're distracting me. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. Hot dog it. Where is it? What was he saying? Okay. So a guy named Matthew, I'm not going to say his last name because I don't think he's going to show, has been arguing that, and I had to delete one comment because it got like gross. He's talking about that atheists, since an atheism outside of the world debate doesn't have to define what not, but defend that there is no God, that therefore these atheists who took a position on it don't have to defend it. I'm like, no, that's not a debate. They took a position in the debate. They have to defend their position. If they can't defend their position, they shouldn't be in the debate. Or they should have had modern day debate change the name of the topic. And you know, there's other ways to debate that topic without having to take a position, but they took the title of the topic in a way that makes them have to take the position. They should have made it an informal debate then. If they're not gonna defend their position, then it should be informal. But that's not even what happened in the debate. In the debate, both Alex and what's the guy's name, Phil, tried to defend their position. So the fact that they didn't do it well is a problem. Now, the fact that they did about 100 times better than Cliff and Stuart, hey, that's great. I'm glad they did 100 times better, but Cliff and Stuart did absolute nonsense. They were terrible. So yeah, they're better than a 1, but that doesn't make it great. So I think I gave the overall debate a 2 out of 5 and a 4 out of 10. Like, it just wasn't a good debate. Partially because nobody could define anything. Nobody knew anything. The only one who seemed to know anything in that whole debate was Alex. So Alex did amazing. Alex on his own was like a 7 out of 10, but that doesn't help the performance of everyone else who just sucked.
This game clearly prefers yellow, but I just happen to have picked the blue one. Now, obviously, that analogy doesn't work because that revolves around chance. But
BS, I'm watching the chat right now. I want to see you convert right now. Let's make this happen. Let's get some holy water, and I will. Let's bless you. Let's do it. I will convert you right now, buddy. Don't think I won't. Answer carefully. Get me a plane ticket. I will be there tonight. We'll do it live. We'll do it live on stream. I will get a plane ticket tonight. Answer correctly. Come on, BS. Answer the question. Blessed is challenging you.
the point specifically being that if the conditions are set up so that there are an almost infinite number of ways that things could have been when none of this could have happened, and only one very precise way that it could have happened, the person who sets up that.
Look, this is an irony. This is an irony, BS. This is an irony above ironies. Blessed hates Catholics and he hates atheists. Or she hates. I'm sorry, I keep on saying he because you said blessed he, and so I keep on saying he. Blessed hates Catholics and blessed hates atheists. Wouldn't it be awesome? Think about this, BS. If her chiding you with this turns you into a Catholic, she'll be even more upset. Let's do this right now, BS. We can do it right now.
Meta condition. What are we to make of their view of the universe? You see what I'm saying?
I think I see where you're going. And I don't think there's just one way where you could set the constants and the equations to end up.
BS, I can make you a Catholic today. I can go to the airport right now. I will buy the plane ticket right now. Let's do it.
With something interesting. This happens to be a really well-studied one that we happen to live in the middle of. Again, going back to Martin Rees' book, Just Six Constants, or whatever, it's close to that. He would argue that these constants are related to each other, so they don't have to have the precise values they do now, as long as their ratios are correct. So there's 6 dimensionless constants that he outlines, including the cosmological constant. And if those are off by just a little bit, things don't work. But there's lots of solutions within that. So I think more of God.
BS, I'm really about to just jump out because the person who challenged me to a debate didn't show at all. This is the exact time we agreed upon and everything, and they didn't show. Do you want to come on and argue over not this one because this is just entertaining? Do you want to argue over the Alex and Cliff debate? You already said it's cool, but I'm just finishing my sentence. If you wanted to, we could. If not, I'm going to hop out in 2 minutes, okay? Blessed, it was nice to have you here. I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm glad you finally found my channel. Feel free to go around all my videos. I need the views. But like I said, if you want your stuff to be seen by someone other than just you, they don't even show me the video, the comments. You have to use YouTube-friendly speak. I'm pretty sure that's YouTube-friendly. Hold on, let me see. I can tell you right now. Is it YouTube-friendly? I think it's YouTube-friendly. No, it's not. Why did Atrocity get banned? Atrocity didn't go through. Look, Atrocity didn't show up, buddy. I'm sorry. It didn't show. Atrocity didn't show up. All right, Blessed. I appreciate you. Have a great night. BS, this was good. Anyone who wants to clip anything, do it now because I am deleting the stream. This was just an invitation to Matthew to come over here and try to show me why God doesn't exist, and he didn't show. So great news. I am now 3 victories in a row where the other opponent who talked a lot of smack about coming on didn't actually show up. I guess that just means Catholicism's true. And that's awesome. Have yourselves a great night. Bye. Oh, and stream.